Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. In studio with me right now, he's got the big cup of coffee. That means it's going to be a busy day today. Congressman Jodey Arrington, welcome back.
Great to be back in the studio, back in the saddle.
Yes.
It feels normal and it feels good. God bless West Texas and God save the Republic.
I will ask you, I was doing a segment before you came on about Speaker Nancy Pelosi calling the President of the United States and Republican lawmakers domestic enemies and enemies of the state, all because of the U.S. Postal Service. You are, I guess, someone who she would consider an enemy of the state, Congressman.
Well, she would most certainly, because I was exposing the lie that there was any crisis. This is a manufactured fake crisis. The money is there. We talked about the $15 billion cash on hand on the floor of the House and how fundamentally broken the U.S. Postal Service is. And they just want to throw $25 billion at it and try to portray the Postal Service as not prepared for the mail-in ballots and then call into legitimacy the outcome of this election. This is a complete game. It's the worst kind because it's predatory. It is preying on people's fears. And so we called her out. And for her to use such inflammatory and violence inciting terminology like enemies of the state, it's what we refer to folks who are terrorists.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe like the domestic terrorists who are burning our cities down, assaulting law enforcement officers and trampling the rights of our law-abiding citizens in Portlandia and other places around the country. She won't even acknowledge that. In fact, worse, she excuses it. But let me be clear to the listeners here, my fellow West Texans and your listeners. The left, this is religion, politics. Their leftist policies are religion, and the end justifies the means. They will at all cost destroy whatever's in front of them that opposes them. And it's one thing to shame and to harass and intimidate politically. That's how they've co-opted the Democrat Party in the House. The mainstream guys have all been co-opted. Now it's the radical left, AOC, the squad is in charge. Wait till they get control of the government. If you think the leftist mob violence that is ravaging our nation is horrible and you watch it in horror, wait till they have the weapon of the government. That's how serious this is. And we're as divided as we've been, and we're as stark in contrast in the vision for the future as we've ever been. And for her to use that kind of language is it's more than unfortunate. It's dangerous.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Postal Service, because this is, to me, this is a conspiracy theory from the left. The Postal Service, on their own website, they say that they deliver over 400 million pieces of mail every single day. 138 million people voted, I think, in the last presidential election. Maybe that goes up to 140 something during this next election. Not nearly that many people will vote via mail. I don't see how the Postal Service can't handle the extra handful pieces of mail every single day.
Listen, mass mail-in voting is fraught with a different kind of problem, which is corruption, abuse, error, but it's not on account of the Postal Service infrastructure and their ability to deliver. So we're obfuscating here, or at least the other side is obfuscating the real problem. Again, there were places like New York. There was a federal election. It was a primary. They're still trying to figure out who won. Yeah. That's not on account of delivering mail. That's because it's a racket. Look at the election laws in California. I mean, that's, by the way, H.R. 1, the premier legislation by the Pelosi Democrats in the House, was to federalize elections and basically apply California's laws to the rest of the country and usurp the state and local election process that is articulated in the Constitution. But yeah, this is a scam, as I said, on the floor of the House, and it's predatory, and it is a payoff to their union bosses. Now, There are hardworking men and women in the Postal Service. Their mission is in the Constitution as well, and it's an important one. But the unions have prevented us from running it the way we ought to. You know, President Trump's a business guy, and he knows waste, fraud, and abuse when he sees it. He knows inefficient operations when he sees it. This is an opportunistic political power play like I've never seen. And, we called him out on the floor of the House. I got an opportunity to participate in the debate. But the Democrats fell in line like they always do.
You had a good line on your a couple of good lines on your floor speech, and one of those was they're a blockbuster video living in a Netflix world. Can they change? Can the Postal Service change, or are we looking at maybe in the future doing away with the Postal Service and saying, hey, privatization, you look at NASA, you made NASA better. Privatization, maybe you can make the Postal Service better.
I'd make this argument for a lot of parts of appendages of the federal government, including the VA. There is a whole lot that we should outsource because we can privatize, which is a dirty word in the swamp because they want more government jobs. And the union wants more members of their union. And forget whether it's well run, forget whether the customer, i.e. the veteran, or in this place the American citizens who are recipients of mail across the country. So it needs to be pared back significantly. Many of their services should be pushed out to the likes of FedEx and others in the private sector. And then there's a component that I think probably, and this was the Trump administration task force, they concluded that there's a piece of it that has a national interest in the federal government maintaining that narrow mission. But it is far from where we are today. It's a far skinnier U.S. Postal Service with a far smaller cost structure. And they could operate in a self-sustaining way like the law requires of them. But for the last 13 years, they've operated in a deficit, and they're billions of dollars in the hole, over $100 billion in unfunded pensions. So this doesn't just not serve the taxpayer. It also fails, as I said on the floor, the workers and the retirees who are counting on their pensions. Yeah. So we need to do right by them too. And the taxpayer, the right way to do that is significantly right size and reform the U.S. Postal Service, not throw $25 billion, for heaven's sakes, at it.
Yeah, when we come back, we'll have much more to get into, including some new legislation that Congressman Arrington has filed, and we'll also get to some coronavirus news as well. Chad Hasty Show, KFYO, Congressman Jodey Arrington in studio. We'll be right back. Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO, we have Congressman Jodey Arrington joining us here in studio, out of the swamp, here in the studio. And, Congressman, I guess let's go back to some legislation that I think it was last week that you announced here in Lubbock, dealing with what we're seeing on TV every night, some of these riots that are breaking out.
Well, too few, not just Democrats, I haven't seen any, but too few Republicans even are voicing condemnation, standing up to the mob, and doing everything that we can do at the federal level, because there is a role, but it is narrow. And then under the right circumstances, you have the Insurrection Act. But we've decided to increase the penalty for rioting on the federal statutes and assaulting a federal law enforcement officer. We also have a resolution signed by Steve Scalise and Andy Biggs, chairman of the Freedom Caucus, and others, that basically just calls it what it is, domestic terrorism. And we list out all the laws that are being broken, federal laws, arson, assaults, etc. And we're saying if you, local government and state governments in Oregon, to be specific, do not get control of this, and they've just totally cowered and let the mob run right over them to torch these law-abiding citizens' homes and to threaten their lives. If that continues to be unabated, and I would suggest we're already there. That's my opinion. Look, the Insurrection Act should be used in extreme situations. But if you don't get control of this, one of our statements has been, you get what you tolerate. And we're starting to see it all over the country. So the Insurrection Act says when the obstruction of justice is so great that you cannot enforce the law, the president has to unilaterally take control for the sake of the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. And, that can't very well pursue life, liberty, and happiness in towns like Portland. So the president hadn't taken that off the table, and you're going to hear more from me on that. But we certainly have to condemn and stand up to the mob. Nobody's doing that. West Texans expect me to do it. I'm right there with them.
Well, and I think that when you look at Portland, now a lot of this is Antifa and everything else that's being driven, but you've got what's going on in Portland, and it's being celebrated almost by the leaders in Portland. And hey, look, they can do it. It gives power to all these other factions in these other cities. And you look at what's going on in Wisconsin right now, where people go, hey, if we just act like they're acted in Portland, who's going to stop us?
It is a copycat at all levels. That is, you've got the left who wants to sow fear and chaos, and then they do, and the local leaders fall down on the job, right? And then you have rogue prosecutors like Kim Gardner in St. Louis go after the law-abiding who are trying to protect themselves by simply exercising their God-given constitutionally protected right to bear arms. So now you've got this horrible situation, and you're right, it is burning across the country, and we've got to be able to stand up to it. The president is deferring a great deal to the local leaders and the states. We've seen, by the way, violence, 25% homicide increase in the 50 largest cities in the country. Obviously, shootings are up, crimes of all kinds are up. So this is a very dangerous situation, and if we don't put an end to it, I fear it's only going to get worse. That's why I'm encouraging the president to really lean into this. Again, the Insurrection Act's been used before. The reason they can't enforce the law, you can't send a police officer out into the sea of people that are shooting commercial fireworks off in their faces, throwing bricks at them. You can't do that and protect the law enforcement officer. Yeah. So we need to be at the ready to take this to the next level.
Let's talk about something else that's been an ongoing issue. Obviously, you have coronavirus. Pandemic is still going on. The president has done some executive orders. I'm not sure where we are on those executive orders. I know there have been some companies who have kind of pushed back on the payroll tax deal because they say, wait a minute, it's going to have to be paid back later, and our employees are going to have to pay more later. How's everything and how's all this lining up in Congress?
Well, the president, just as you know and your listeners know, is a man of action, and he's frustrated, as many Americans, on account of the inaction of Congress. I don't like governing by executive order. I don't like that in any scenario. Okay, that is one way to usurp the will of the people, and it takes pressure off of Congress. We need members of Congress to go to their district and feel the burn of the convictions and the indignation of their citizens for the lack of action. So to take that off of them is also a bad dynamic. I think people are saying this not going to hold up in a court of law. That is the payroll holiday as well as the plus up on the unemployment insurance. I told the president personally on Air Force One and the trip to Odessa, Texas, to God's country, that we need not extend the unemployment insurance. It is a major barrier to getting people back to work. And what we have to do to get our country back is to reopen, to get our kids in school, and I'm proud of Lubbock Independent School District for really leaning into that, and to get their parents back to work. But when you're paying people, and in our district, 75% of the people on unemployment were getting paid more on unemployment than in their previous job. So I'm not a big fan of that. I think there is a way to target assistance like we did before, but more targeted to people who need it. I think payroll tax holidays are great, and it incentivizes work. So I'm for a lot of ways to provide the temporary relief and assistance to families, individuals, to local businesses who were shut down, no fault of their own, because the cost long term is far greater if we don't do these things. We just can't structure them in a way that cuts our nose off to spite our face, and the unemployment insurance does that, I'm afraid. Even the president's extension would go from 75% to about 55% of people making more in unemployment. Unacceptable right now. And like I told him, it will hurt our chances of economic recovery. It will hurt his chances in November.
Yeah. You got one more segment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good? All right, let's take the break. When we come back, we'll wrap up today's show with Congressman Jodey Arrington here on the Chad Hasty Show. All right, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. Final segment, Congressman Jodey Arrington in studio. August recess is happening right now, Congressman, and that means you've been all over the district, haven't you?
I have, and it's been good for my soul. I'm always energized. I get to represent the best of the best. These are people who truly believe in our traditional American values. They believe that freedom is quintessential to this experiment and to our prosperity and to the blessings that will ensue for our children and grandchildren. They understand the fight, and they back me 100%. And they are praying people, as I told the president. So I'm invigorated, talking to ag groups, talking to teachers, lots of time here in the beginning of school year, trying to encourage our teachers and thank them for managing risk, the risk of our new risk profile in the new life post-COVID. You got to do it. They're doing it, and I'm proud of them. I wish more of the country were operating like them.
Well, and, I think, one thing that you and your family, what y'all have decided to do, I guess in D.C. and in that area, it's, no school, no in-person school.
That's right.
Lubbock ISD, they're doing in-person school, and you said, hey, kids, you got to be in school. They're back here in Lubbock.
The devastation on our children, the lost generation, you remember this. The kids that didn't get to go to school, 70% of LISD students are economically disadvantaged. They have supplemental nutrition. They have various other assistance. Who knows what the stability is like at home? But I can tell you there's going to be tremendous abuse, tremendous neglect, and the fact that they don't have that structured environment, they're not learning. You can't get these young kids, not my kids' age, to sit down, pay attention in on an online environment. Now, 30% of LISD's parents chose to do that. I'm glad they had freedom to choose.
Yeah.
But, we're blessed. Our kids, Nate, Jane, and Hank are Roscoe Wilson Wranglers, and I couldn't be happier, and Mama couldn't be happier. And so it was a blessing for us, but I hurt for the kids around the country who are going to lose so much. And it's going to impact them not just intellectually from an education standpoint, but emotionally and socially. So that's why we got to lean into this. We got to reopen. Not be afraid, Not be afraid.
Do you when you've been traveling around, do you get the impression from everyday Americans that they're not afraid, but that government's afraid to reopen?
Yeah, see, government is risk averse. Let's look at Fauci. Dr. Fauci, his metric of success is no one gets sick, no one goes to the hospital, no one dies, because he's an epidemiologist. In fact, he's a government bureaucrat epidemiologist. Yeah. Not picking on him. I'm just saying that's his risk tolerance, 0. But guess what? He has the luxury of doing that because he gets his paycheck whether we reopen the economy or not. You talk about a perverse setup for decision making. So, yeah, the folks I'm talking to have to go on with their lives or they don't feed their families. Yeah. So we the people, I mean, one of the big fundamental issues and the differences between a Joe Biden and a Donald Trump and the left that has hijacked Democrats and Republicans, I think the left folks and Democrats believe that the people are just dumb and irresponsible, and they need a nanny state. They need somebody to tell them what's responsible and safe. We need to give them information, and it needs to be good information. And then they need to make what's the decisions best for their livelihoods and for their lives and for their local communities. So the president's done it right to delegate and defer to the state and local governments and to we the people ultimately. And we don't do enough of that, and that's part of the losing of our liberties in this country and part of why we're fighting every day to get them back.
Yeah, and it should scare a lot of people that you had Joe Biden this past week who said, yeah, I'd shut it down again. I'd shut down the entire economy, the entire nation. I'd shut it all down again if a scientist told me to do so. And if you go up to Fauci right now, I don't know what he would say. I really have no, because you're right. he looks at it, and I don't blame him either, because his job is just like an economist.
That's right.
The economist's job is to look out for the economy. Fauci's job is to look out for health. And I don't know of any doctor that you go to who says, like, yeah, if some people getting sick's cool. I don't have a problem with that. Fauci, he wants nobody to get, but you can't live in that world.
You can't. He lives in that vacuum, in that land of theory. The people listening to us right now, they're praying every day, God help us. Let my husband keep his job. Let my kids stay healthy and go to school, because we have a 2-income home, and 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. That's the reality. And Fauci needs to come and do a tour of West Texas with me, and he'd get, I think, a dose of reality. COVID's not going away. It's going to get better. We're accelerating the therapeutics. We're accelerating the vaccines. But if you're 70 years of age or younger and you don't have underlying conditions, you're more likely to die by the flu, seasonal flu, than this COVID. So keep it in perspective. Be smart. You know what to do. Be safe, especially for our seniors and those who have underlying problems, health problems. Otherwise, let's manage this together, and let's do the right thing for the country, and let's reopen and move forward.
I'll ask you in the time that we have left some campaign or election info. The Republicans taking back the House. What do you think the chances are right now?
50-50. I think the margin of error on House, Senate, and presidency is so close that it could literally go either way, any combination, a sweep on both sides. I really believe that. And that should scare people because we've never been this, like I said, divided and also this polarized in terms of our vision and policies for the country. Literally, it is socialism versus freedom. That's on the ballot. And the House has a great opportunity. We just won the House seat, congressional seat 25 in California. We haven't flipped a Democrat seat to Republican in over 20 years. So if that's a bellwether, Mike Garcia is a sign of good things to come. I'm encouraged, but I want everybody to be vigilant.
Yeah, it's one of those where Republican voters, they've got to do their job. They've got to turn out and vote.
Everything has to be working. Everybody has to be pulling on the rope. And this is an election for the ages. I think it's the most consequential election, not just of our lifetime, I think in the history of the country.
When officially are you guys supposed to be back? I know the speaker can kind of call you back whenever, but...
Well, she's always got another scene from her one-act play, which is entitled Get Rid of Trump at All Costs, so who knows? But in a couple of weeks... we will, that we have sort of scheduled time in 2 weeks to be back in session.
Is there anything, I mean, other than, maybe, dealing with coronavirus stuff, is there anything that's going to get done between now and the election?
No,
Do you
unfortunately.
think even coronavirus stuff will get done?
Oh, I said it would before, and we're just letting this thing drag out. I'm not, by the way, she wants $3 trillion. I can tell you that ain't going to happen.
Right.
And it's certainly something I would oppose. But there are needs, and we need to do some of this. And our country's in a crisis. That was the thing that was just insulting, is to have not just this manufactured crisis, this sort of joke of a vote on the Postal Service. Meanwhile, you got Americans, our fellow Americans everywhere are hurting from this unprecedented crisis, from the shutdown and from government policy. So, yeah, we need to do something. It needs to be very skinny, very narrow, very targeted, but there are things to do. I don't have a lot of confidence at this point.
All right. Congressman Jodey Arrington, as always, appreciate your time. We'll let you get on the road and head out to Plainview today.
Go Bulldogs, and God bless, and go West Texas.
All right.